It was a Tuesday evening, and I was sitting at my kitchen table eating leftover soup I had made the night before. The kind of soup you make when you have too many vegetables and not enough reasons to cook something nice. I had the news on low in the other room. I was not really watching it, just needed some noise in the house. My cat, a fat orange tabby named Biscuit, was sleeping on the chair next to me like he owned the place. He probably did. I was reaching for my glass of water when my phone lit up on the table. It was a text from my son, Marcus. I read it, and then I set my spoon down very slowly. Dad, we're doing Thanksgiving at the house this year. Lisa's whole family is flying in. It is going to be tight. Real tight. We think it is better if you celebrate on your own this time. We will make it up to you at Christmas. No hard feelings. I sat there with my water glass halfway to my mouth. No hard feelings. I was 64 years old. I had given that boy everything I had, and then some. Let me tell you who I am so you understand the weight of those words. My name is Raymond. I worked for 33 years as a senior electrician and later a project supervisor for a commercial construction company. I raised Marcus by myself after his mother Carol walked out when he was 9 years old. I did not fall apart. I kept the lights on. I helped with homework at the kitchen table every night. I drove him to soccer practice on Saturday mornings and sat in the cold bleachers clapping even when his team lost by 5 goals. I never missed a single school event. 4 years ago, Marcus called me because he and his wife Lisa wanted to buy a house. The bank said they needed a bigger down payment or they could not get approved. He asked if I could help. I said yes before he finished the sentence. I had a savings account I had been putting money into for 15 years. I pulled out $47,000 and I wired it to his account. He called me that same afternoon and said, "Dad, I will pay every single dollar back. I promise you." I told him not to worry about it. That is what fathers do. Now here is the part people do not always know, because Marcus himself did not broadcast it. That house they bought was not just any house. It sat on a half-acre lot in a neighborhood that had been quietly getting more valuable every year. But more than that, I had actually co-signed the mortgage. My name was on the loan documents because Marcus did not have enough credit history to qualify on his own. So I was not just a helper. I was a legal partner in that transaction. I had taken on real financial risk for my son and his wife. I also want to tell you something about the last few years because it matters. After Marcus married Lisa, things changed in ways that were slow and hard to name at first. The calls got shorter. The visits got less frequent. When they did come over, Lisa always seemed like she was counting the minutes until they could leave. Marcus stopped asking my opinion on things. He stopped sharing news with me the way he used to. I told myself it was just life. People get busy. Couples build their own world. I gave them space because I did not want to be the father who could not let go. But there is a difference between giving someone space and becoming invisible to them. I had crossed into invisible without even noticing it happen. So I sat at that kitchen table on a Tuesday night reading a text that told me no hard feelings, and I made myself a promise right then. I was not going to fire off an angry reply. I was not going to call him up and yell. I was going to be calm. I was going to be smart. And I was going to handle this the way I had handled every hard thing in my life. Quietly and completely. I texted back 4 words. "Okay, understood. Take care." Then I went to bed. I did not sleep well, but I went to bed. The next morning, I called my brother Dennis. Dennis is 7 years older than me, and he spent 20 years working in real estate before he retired. He is the kind of man who has seen everything twice and still raises an eyebrow. I told him what happened. There was a long pause on the line. Then he said, "Raymond, you are on that mortgage, aren't you?" I said yes. Another long pause. Then he said, "Call a lawyer today. Not tomorrow. Today. I want to be honest with you about something. I'm not the kind of person who looks for fights. I never have been. My whole life, I have been the man who smooths things over, who finds the middle ground, who keeps the peace even when keeping the peace costs him something. I learned a long time ago that the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest one. And I carried that belief for 64 years. But there comes a point where keeping the peace becomes something else entirely. It becomes letting people treat your kindness like a doormat they wipe their boots on every single time they walk in. I called a lawyer named Patricia Chun. She had been recommended to me by a guy I used to work with whose brother had gone through a messy property situation. I explained the whole thing to her. The $47,000. My name on the mortgage. The text message. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I was done, she said, "Mr. Raymond, you have more standing here than you probably realize." She asked me to come the next day and bring every document I had. I went home and I pulled out my filing cabinet. I drove to her office the next morning with a folder thick enough to use as a doorstop. The mortgage documents. The wire transfer record showing the $47,000. The email Marcus had sent me the month after they moved in saying he would pay me back within 3 years. 3 years had come and gone. Not $1 had come back. Patricia went through everything carefully. She made notes. She asked questions. At the end of the meeting, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You have a very strong case for a formal debt recovery claim, and possibly more, depending on how they respond." I told her I did not want to go to war with my son. I wanted to wake him up. She nodded and said, "Sometimes the only way to wake someone up is to make some noise." We put together 2 things. First, a formal written demand letter for repayment of the $47,000, which was documented in his own written words as a loan. Second, we drafted a notice regarding my position as a co-signer on the mortgage, making clear that I intended to formally review and potentially exit that arrangement, which had financial implications for them that were not small. The letters went out by certified mail the first week of December. Both of them. One addressed to Marcus. One addressed to the mortgage servicer, notifying them that the co-signer was initiating a formal review of the loan agreement. Patricia told me this was completely within my rights. Marcus called me the same day the letter arrived. I know because I was sitting in my kitchen when my phone rang, and I saw his name, and I let it ring. Then I listened to the voicemail. He sounded genuinely shocked, like a man who had just walked into a room he did not expect. He said, "Dad, what is this? What is going on? Can you please call me back?" He sounded less angry than confused, which told me something important. He had truly not expected me to do anything. In his mind, I was the kind of man who would swallow this whole and wait by the phone for an invitation to Christmas. And maybe the old me would have. But I had been sitting in that kitchen eating leftover soup alone, and I had thought about all the Thanksgivings I had cooked and all the birthdays I had shown up for and all the sacrifices that had gone unremarked and unremembered. Thanksgiving came. I made a proper meal for myself. Roasted a small chicken because I do not eat a whole turkey alone. Made cornbread from scratch, the recipe my mother taught me when I was 12 years old. I put Biscuit's bed near the heating vent in the kitchen so he would be warm while I cooked. I turned on some old jazz records I had not played in years. Ate at my own table with a cloth napkin and a candle because I decided I was worth the trouble of a candle. It was a quiet day, a real quiet day, but it did not break me the way Marcus probably thought it would. Marcus called that night at around 8. He sounded like a man who had been coached to call. His voice had that careful quality, the one people use when they're trying to sound normal while being very aware that things are not normal. "How was your day, Dad?" "Good," I said. "Quiet. Peaceful." There was a pause. "We missed you," he said. Now, I have known my son his entire life. I know when he means something and when he is saying what he thinks he should say. This was the second kind. "I'm sure you did," I said, and I kept my voice warm. We talked for a little while about nothing much. Then he said, "Dad, about that letter." I said, "We can talk about that when you're ready to have a real conversation." Another pause. "What does that mean?" "It means what it says, Marcus." After we hung up, I sat in my living room and looked at the photo on my mantle. It is a picture of me and Marcus from about 20 years ago. He is 12. We are at a fishing lake about 40 minutes from the house. He is holding up a catfish and grinning like it is the greatest thing that ever happened in human history. I looked at that photo for a long time. That boy loved me completely and without strategy. He did not calculate what I was worth to him or what access to me cost him. He just loved me because I was his dad and I was there. Somewhere between that fishing lake and this Tuesday text message, something had shifted in how he saw me. Not in some dramatic moment, but slowly, the way furniture fades in a sunny room. You don't notice it until one day you look up and everything is a little washed out. I wanted to bring the color back, but I was not going to do it by shrinking myself. Marcus hired his own attorney. I found this out from Patricia, who received a letter from a law firm in early January. The letter was professional and polite and full of language designed to slow things down and cloud the issue. It questioned whether my wire transfer constituted a loan or a gift. It pointed out that no formal loan agreement had been signed, only an email. Patricia called me and explained all of this and then said, "This is their strategy. They are hoping you get tired and go away." I told her I was a man who had worked 33 years in construction. I did not get tired easily. Things moved slowly through January and into February. Letters going back and forth between attorneys. A phone call mediation that accomplished nothing except proving that both sides were paying their lawyers by the hour. Marcus and I barely spoke during this time. When we did, it was short and careful, like two people navigating around a piece of broken glass on the floor. I missed him. I want to be honest about that. I miss my son. Not the version of him that sent that text, but the real one, the one who used to fall asleep in the truck on the way home from fishing trips. The thing that changed everything happened on a Saturday morning in late February. Marcus showed up at my front door without calling. I saw his car pull up from a kitchen window. He sat in the car for almost 5 minutes before he got out. I watched him do it. He walked up to the door slowly, like a man walking into something he knew he deserved. I opened the door before he knocked. He looked at me, and for a moment neither of us said anything. He looked tired in the way that goes deeper than sleep. He looked like a man who had been arguing with himself for weeks. He came inside and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I used to help him with math homework when he was 10, where I told him about his grandfather dying, where I ate my leftover soup alone on a Tuesday night while he sent me a text telling me not to be upset. He put both hands flat on the table and looked down at them. Then he looked up at me and said, "I am sorry, Dad." Just like that. No setup. No explanation first. Just those words in that order. I poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from him. "Tell me what happened," I said. And he did. He told me that Lisa's family had strong opinions about the way her husband's father was involved in their life, that they felt he called too often and dropped in without planning and took up too much space. He told me he had been trying to manage everyone and had done it badly by managing me down instead of standing up to the pressure from her side. He told me the text was the worst way he could have handled it, and he had known that even as he was sending it. He said, "I think I forgot that you were a person. I started treating you like a situation to handle." That hit me harder than almost anything he could have said, because it was honest, not an excuse, an actual reckoning. I told him that the money had never been the real issue, that I had given it freely and would give it again, but that I needed to know I was his father and not a resource he accessed when it was convenient. I told him that the years I had given him, the small league games and the homework and the sick days and the hard days, those years did not disappear just because he had a new family now. They were still there. They still meant something. He sat with that for a while without defending himself, which took some courage from a man who had been in defensive mode for 2 months. Then he asked me what I actually needed in order to move forward. Not legally, in real life. I thought about it before answering. I told him I needed to be included, not managed, not scheduled in like an appointment, actually included as his father. I told him I needed him to stop letting other people define what I was worth to him. He nodded slowly. He stayed for almost 3 hours that afternoon. We reached a formal resolution in late March. Marcus and Lisa agreed to sign a proper repayment agreement for the $47,000, structured over 4 years with no interest because I did not want interest from my own son. More importantly, I was removed as co-signer on the mortgage, which had been the piece with the most financial exposure for me. Patricia reviewed everything and told me it was clean and fair. I signed the documents on a Thursday afternoon in her office and drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Not victorious, just lighter. The week after everything was settled, I drove out to see a piece of land I had been thinking about for a long time. There's a rural county about 2 hours east of where I live where land is still affordable if you know where to look. I had always had a quiet idea of buying a small plot someday, something with trees and maybe a creek running through it. Nothing fancy, just a place that was mine in a way that was simple and clean. I walked the property with a real estate agent named Gary who wore too much cologne but knew his business well enough. I stood in the middle of that field on a cold March morning with bare trees all around me and soft ground under my boots, and I thought about all of it. The text message, the letters, the kitchen table, the 2 hours with my son. I thought about Carol leaving and about every morning I'd gotten up anyway and made breakfast and gotten Marcus to school on time. I thought about the idea that giving everything you have to someone should come with at least the basic dignity of being seen. A woman I had known years ago used to say that love without limits is not love. It is just fear of being alone dressed up in generosity. She was right about that. I pulled out my phone and looked at it for a moment standing there in that cold field. Then I put it back in my jacket pocket. There was nothing I needed to send, nothing that needed saying right now. Some things you just have to stand inside of until they settle. The drive home was long and quiet, and I kept the radio off the whole way. Marcus called me that evening. We talked for almost half an hour. Easy talking, the kind without an agenda behind it. He asked about the land. I told him about the creek. He said it sounded like a good thing. I told him I thought it was. I told him maybe sometime when the weather gets warm, he could come out and walk it with me. He said he would like that, and I believed him. I got home as the evening was turning dark, and the porch light was on because I had left it on that morning, which I almost never do. Biscuit was sitting in the front window, looking at me like I had been gone for a month. I went inside and fed him first. Then I made myself something simple for dinner and ate at my own table. And I thought about what it means to reach an age where you finally stop accepting less than what you deserve. Not because you are bitter, not because you want to make anyone pay for anything, but because you understand that the years behind you are real and they were hard and they are worth something. And if someone in your life has started treating those years like they are nothing, the kindest thing you can do for them and for yourself is to show them clearly and quietly that they are wrong. Marcus is not a bad man. He made bad choices for a while because I made it easy for him to. We are both doing the work now. He called last week to tell me that he had framed an old photo, the one from a fishing lake when he was 12. He hung it in their hallway. He sent me a picture of it on the wall. I looked at that photo for a long time. That grinning 12-year-old holding his catfish. I saved the picture to my camera roll. Then I poured myself a small drink, sat down by the window, and watched the evening come across my yard. Quiet and familiar. And I thought that some things really do find their way back. They just need someone steady enough to wait.